everybody, thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to start setting up my September bullet journal layouts, but I decided for September that I'm going to be doing a pull tab again. So I'll be doing two separate videos, one a tutorial with my pull tab and then another video with the rest of the setup. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. So I am in a B5 Archer and Olive notebook. I will have measurements for an A5 up on my blog as well, so that if you're in a smaller A5 notebook, you can easily make this there as well. So we're gonna get started. I've already outlined my bookshelf. I'm making it pretty big, as in the whole page. Also, instead of drawing a border, I have left that blank, and that is where we will have the pull tab that pulls out. We will be creating the flap. So basically it's going to be a bookshelf. When you pull the pull tab, it's going to flap open. Okay, so let's get started. I have a B5 notepad from Archer and Olive as well. If you don't have extra paper, whatever, you can just grab it out the back of your notebook as an option as well. We're not getting too fancy. We're going to need roughly 3 pieces of extra paper. So there are the 3 pieces of paper we need. This is going to be for the flaps and as well as the piece that we're going to pull out. So what I've done is I've made my letters roughly 3 squares high and I've paired them in 2s. Now I can tell you the reason why they're in 2s is because when you start adding, the more flaps you add, the messier it gets, especially if you're wanting to write on the next page, for example. So what I decided was we're going to pair up the letters in 2. That way we're not going to bulk up the pages too much. Okay, so all my letters are roughly 3 blocks high. And as you can see, I've made parts of the shelf various heights. So what I want to do is I want to make it so that it's completely covered. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares high. And this one is, we're just going to do this one 6 as well, I think, just so that it again doesn't get too bulky or too complicated. So what I've done is I've made my letters 3 squares high, and then there's different variations or different heights on my shelves, but we're going to keep the strips all the same just to make it easier. The narrower of the shelves is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The narrower of the shelves is 6 blocks high. So we're going to do 6 squares here as well. So we're going to be cutting our extra paper lengthwise. That way we have the extra space we're going to need. Otherwise, if you do it widthwise, we might not have enough paper to create the flaps. Because remember, we're going to be taking a space like that and it's going to be folded over like that, and so that's where we need that extra length from, which is why we'll be cutting this lengthwise. So again, we'll be making it 6 squares long, 6 squares wide, and the whole length of the page. Okay, so we have our 5 strips. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to start cutting the mechanism into place. So we're going to start from the very edge of the paper, and I think I want it to be, again, we're going to err on the side of caution, and we're going to count 8 blocks in from the very edge, including the edge being a block. So 8 blocks in, and then you're going to count another 2 blocks down. Okay, and then we're going to mark down halfway, so 1.5 blocks, a square and a half. So this is one of the reasons why I enjoy the Dark Grid journals for this, is because you have your squares, your dots, and so it's kind of a cheat way to measure, but it works. So we're going to mark all of our pieces in this way. Okay, so once you have your pieces marked out, we're going to start cutting. So when we're cutting, you are cutting along this line to the halfway mark, the 1.5 square mark on either side. Then you're going to cut a tiny little piece about the width of your scissors just on the top towards the flap portion. So this is the flap portion, this is the pull portion, the pull tab portion, and you're going to then cut a tiny slit of paper and you're going to fold these in like so, and then you're going to get rid of these pieces of paper, okay, so that it ends up looking like this, where this is folded in. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to cut a strip off either side of the pull tab portion. So we're just going to cut that off. So this is going to make the pull tab portion a lot narrower, and the reason why we're doing that is to help keep the mechanism in place. Okay, and then this is probably the most important part for getting this to work. You are going to now fold it at this line. So the line that's by the long portion, not the line that's by the short portion, but the long portion. So we're just going to fold that back. Make sure it's even. And there we have our flap that's getting ready to be used. Okay, so you're going to do this for the other 4 pieces. We are now all set. These are our mechanisms, and we will be coming back to that shortly. But for now, we are going to start cutting into our notebook, which is probably the scariest part, but it needs to be done. Okay, so I've grabbed a little cutting mat that I'm going to put under my pages. And what we're going to do is, we know that this is 6 squares wide. So just to be sure, we're going to count it out to make sure that we're cutting in the right place, because you measure twice, cut once. So what we're going to want to do is, because we cut this thinner, we're basically going to want to line this up in the middle so that it sits in the middle and it doesn't look kind of off. So that's where we'll be cutting one. Here we'll be cutting slots. Now slots are only a fraction wider than a slit. So a slit is 1 cut, a slot is a little bit wider. So we're going to measure this out, and then we're probably just going to make it a little bit longer, just a fraction longer. So that's 4 squares exactly. We're going to throw a little bit of extra room on both ends. Now we're going to get our craft knife. I'm using a We Are Memory Keepers art knife. I think I've had this thing for about 12 years now. Obviously I've changed the blade out, but the holder itself I've had for a while. And you can grab a ruler to help guide you. I'm just going to cut this here quickly. So we're going to cut along the line that we just drew. And then just a fraction over, we're going to cut a second line. And just join the 2 lines, and there we have our slot. So you're going to do that on the rest of the page too. Again, use a ruler if you're not comfortable. So now that we have our slots, we are going to cut the slit for our pull tab quickly before I forget. And that's going to be just along the edge of our bookshelf. So there we have that slot there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to feed one of our first pull tabs through, pulling the arms through, and then straightening them out. So that's going to help keep the flap in place. And then that is how it will look. So don't worry about the edges just yet. We're going to deal with that shortly. So I'm just going to finish feeding this through. So what I'm doing is I am just straightening out the seam of the flaps, just to kind of keep them in place so that they don't pop up. So just to be extra sure of where I'm placing it down, I'm grabbing removable adhesive. This one's from Tombow. And I'm just going to kind of glue these in place where I want them. This is important for knowing that when we glue these pull tabs to the bigger piece, that they're in the right place. This is an extra step. You don't have to do this. I'm just choosing to do this so that it's sitting exactly where I want it to. So that's what the back of our page is going to look like. So now I'm just making sure that the fold is, I guess, sturdy. I don't think that's the right word, but that's what we're gonna go for. Okay, now I'm taking our second piece of paper and we're going to cut it to size so that it fits in our slot. So we're going to have to cut just two squares on one end, one square on the other. Now because of the rounded corners, I'm going to cut it just on the, instead of cutting it all on one side, I'm just going to cut it here to get rid of those rounded corners. So now that we have it cut to size, I'm going to trim the edge off here, and we're actually going to fold this in half. So the reason why we're doing this is to make our pull tab stronger, so that it's easier to pull the pieces. So we're going to place this in here. I'm just going to cut it just a little bit more. Okay, cut that a little bit smaller than I meant to, but that's fine. So you're going to place that in the slit. And it doesn't matter if it goes all the way in, we're going to trim it anyways. We're just going to start making sure that it's long enough to fit our pull tabs. Okay, so now we're going to start cutting it to size. I'm cutting it roughly halfway down the halfway point of this guy, and of course now it's moving. Okay, and you can either glue it inside of it or you can glue it on top of it. I think I'm going to glue it inside of it, so let's do it this way. And if you're worried about getting your pull tab straight, just line it up with the dot grids in your notebook, which I really love that too, actually. So perfect. Now I'm taking permanent adhesive and applying just a little bit to the edge. Just grabbing a paper clip to hold it in place. Never mind about lining the dots up. What you're going to do is you're going to make sure you have the same amount of squares showing, so that way you know it's even. And the dots might not line up, but at least this will be even. Because that's all we care about, is that that is even. Okay, so I'm going to leave my paper clip there to hold it in place. And we're going to keep going. So while you're gluing, it's very important that these stay flat and even, or else it's going to bubble up. Now this is probably the most difficult part of this, is just making sure that everything stays flat and even. So when I'm making my pull tabs, I like to keep as much length as possible for as long as possible. That way I have extra room to play with in case things go a little haywire, because you can always cut off. It's really hard to put back on, and I've tried. Okay, so we're gonna slip this guy in underneath here. So before we glue that, we're gonna see how it's working. We're gonna get rid of our removable adhesive, and that is working how I want it to. So that's great. Now we're going to trim this down to size. Now before we trim that, we are going to glue it down here. Making sure everything's flat before you glue it down. Okay. And then before you cut it, you're going to, again, make sure everything's flat and this is in position. And then you're just going to cut it to size. And pulling it out one last time, we're just going to glue this edge. So just gonna grab an extra notebook to help me out here. Okay, so I just moved it into place so that my tabs were sitting where I wanted them to. And this is arguably the hardest part of this whole pull tab experience, and that is gluing everything in place. Now I've run out of my tape runner, so I'm just using the tape glue, and you're going to start gluing along the edges. Okay, and then because I want this to stay in place, I'm going to glue along the bottom here, right under the pull tab. Okay, so the trick here, again, is to try and glue it as flat as possible. And this is why I like the 160 GSM notebooks for this, because they are thicker and a little bit hardier. Okay. And there we go. There is your library bookshelf pull tab. So the reason why we put glue along the very edges is so that the mechanisms have space to lift and do that. Otherwise, if you glue too much, you're going to run into issues where it's getting stuck. So I've practiced a lot, and I can tell you that for sure, but that is our tutorial for creating this. Now, if you'd like to see how I go ahead and decorate this, you can watch my September bullet journal plan with me video, and that'll be the next one. Thank you so much for watching today. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions or comments. I have more detailed instructions over on the blog, which I have linked down below, that you can check out. And I will have the directions for doing this in an A5 size journal down there as well. It's not any different, you're just looking at different sizes. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.